also say this about Lincoln Riley's legacy and how it bridges from Oklahoma to USC. We will find out in future years whether Oklahoma, and for as great as the program is historically, from a brand standpoint, and then from the standpoint of facilities and resources and everything that goes into what's happening right now, whether that is truly a place where you can win a national championship. So we'll see if maybe the shortcomings that Lincoln Riley experienced at Oklahoma either were based on his shortcomings as a coach, maybe, or just a lack of tenure, that if he would have been there 3 or 4 more years, 5 more years, that we would have seen him break through, or that maybe Oklahoma, especially an Oklahoma version in the Big 12, just isn't equipped based on its recruiting that is extremely high, but maybe not quite where it needs to be versus the truly elite in the nation, a place that can win a national championship anymore.
Well, my immediate reaction to that is that, in 2017, Lincoln Riley had, really as loaded a roster and as loaded an offense as he reasonably could have hoped for. And for those who haven't heard me say it, I'm going to say it again, that the worst in-game decision of Lincoln Riley's entire coaching career was not going for it in fourth down and half a yard from the 15.5-yard line in overtime against Georgia in that 2018 Rose Bowl. You have the quarterback, you have the running back, you have an elite offensive line. What, you are afraid of that you'll get stopped on fourth and half a yard in the red zone in overtime against Kirby Smart's defense in a game that, had over 90 total points at the time. Like, that is the decision where, it's a lot like Sean McVay with the Rams. I mean, I know he won a Super Bowl, but like, we've seen Sean McVay, just paying attention to the NFL, we've seen Sean McVay be very conservative in a lot of third and fourth down and short situations. Like, he's not the riverboat gambler that you might expect of a really young coach. And Lincoln Riley had his moment of paralysis in that Georgia-Oklahoma game. So the point of that is to say that, decisions can shape outcomes. And I don't think that Oklahoma is so far below the Kirbys, the Dabos, the Sabans, that it faces, a significant gulf in talent and in terms of what it can achieve. I think that gulf is not very wide at all. And I do think that Georgia should be favored to win the national title. And obviously, I think part of that is playing the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Like, Georgia just played the SEC championship game in Atlanta. It now gets to play the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Like, that is a home game against an Ohio State team with a lot to prove, an Ohio State team that I think is pretty soft. So I think Georgia has the right matchups to win the national title. But, like, even looking at Georgia's win over LSU, I mean, it was a comfortable win, but, Jaden Daniels was hurt. And also, the LSU is a 4-loss team. Like, this was not 2019 LSU, to be sure. It wasn't even like Les Miles' 2011 LSU team. It was several notches worse. And Georgia was playing it with its food for a lot of that game. And of course, if we didn't have that blocked field goal return for a touchdown, it might have been a very different game, because Georgia's corners were struggling with LSU's receivers early in that game. It really could have been a very different game without that blocked field goal return. And we also saw Georgia, struggle with Georgia Tech for 20 minutes. Like, that was a pretty even game on the scoreboard for a quarter and a half before Georgia finally woke up. Georgia scored just 16 points against a Kentucky team, which lost at home to Vanderbilt. I mean, Georgia barely beat Missouri 26-22 in a game that was legitimately down to the wire. Like, that was still a contest with 3-4 minutes left. It was still very much up in the air. Like, Georgia has not been this team that was, several notches ahead of every non-Alabama opponent the way it was last year. This Georgia team is much closer to the pack. It's much closer to the rest of the sport, which is why Michigan would have a chance against the Dogs in a potential national championship game. And of course, that game is going to be in LA, so not as easy a commute for Georgia, and it might not feel like a Georgia home game. You'll probably get more Michigan fans in the building if you do get, I'm just projecting, if you do get a Georgia Michigan championship game. So it's not a lock the way most Georgia games felt like last year. Obviously, the Alabama games were not locks, but every non-Alabama game that Georgia played last year did feel like a lock. You don't get that same sense this year, especially the way Georgia, could not separate itself from Kentucky, from Missouri. So I make that point about Georgia this year to emphasize that, no, I don't think that at Oklahoma, or for that matter at USC, that there's this impossible gulf that you can't really make up in terms of ground and with recruiting, with the transfer portal. I think that's a bridge that Lincoln Riley can definitely cross at USC. I don't think that Georgia, exists on this mountaintop that is unreachable for the Trojans.